Action.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. This is a video series here on the channel called the Help Action series, and as part of the Life by the Square Inch portion of the channel. And tonight, I'm going to be talking about player agency. And I have with me this time not one guest, but two, a surprise guest, as a matter of fact. So, Barker, Tim, you sons of bitches. How are you?
Don't you talk about my mother that way. we just met. Good. Thanks for having both of us on.
Yeah.
Thanks for jumping in, Tim, at the last second, because I was thinking like, yeah, you know, we're going to go over to Tim. We're in Florida. I'm in Florida. This is not like a hologram. I'm in Florida next to Tim, actually.
I'm doing a Tupac Coachella of Barker.
They were having a Good Friday sale on Ab Tabbers. We got to.
That's a damn Good Friday. All right. The problem was, you know, we were going to hang out in the evening, and I'm like, man, but I have this podcast to do, and it was just such a dumb thing that it didn't hit me sooner. Like, why not just have Tim jump on? It's almost like, you know, it didn't occur to me that we work together and might have some similar or different things to say about player agency.
And every campaign we've played in has been almost exclusively with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so yeah, I don't think it'll work at all. We'll see how it goes.
So we gotta cut this.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to work in some chemistry later.
Fix it in post.
Yeah.
Add some reverb. There's not enough.
Put you guys in some warm tones, so it kind of makes it look a lot more intimate.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm just gonna stay right here.
Super happy to have both of you guys on. I've had the opportunity, luckily, to play with you guys a couple of times and run a game for each of you independently. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of happy to have you back here on the channel to do this. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think most recently for me was the L5R game that we played in Jeremy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Played and run. That was fun.
Yeah. And the most recent, actually, the only one that I've run for Tim was the Clue game.
Clue. Yep. And in fact, on my monitor over here, you can't see it, but there's actually the pictures of my character, and so I was looking, and that's what reminded me of it.
Nice. That's awesome.
Well, I gotta see.
That was a really fun game.
Oh, that's so perfect. Is that
perfect?
Is it Mads? Oh, that's so perfect. Yep. It's not Mads. What's his name?
Christoph Waltz.
Christoph Waltz. Yep.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So I happen to know what both of you are like as players, and I think you both have a lot to add as far as player agency goes, both in games and for today's topic, for whenever we're talking about it. So we have a lot of questions that kind of came from the community. So I think we're just going to dive in and get started if you guys are ready.
I love that.
Sweet.
Awesome. Okay, so one of the first things that I really like to talk about is, how did you first find gaming? What is it that brought you into this hobby, and when?
Who was earlier? That's who should go first. Mine was probably 19, like around circa 2099.
It was a little earlier for me, but not much.
Go ahead.
So my first introduction into gaming was, you might be able to hear my daughter singing in the bath also.
Yeah.
But my first introduction to gaming was my buddy John Chapman's house, and he was the kind of the bad friend, right? So he was always that, friend where we weren't really supposed to go over there without asking. He had fireworks, his dad owned guns, that sort of thing. And so anyway, one day he goes, "Hey, we're driving across the street to my friend Roy's house, and we're going to play something called D&D. And I go, "Oh, I've heard of D&D. And he goes, "Okay, cool." So we get into Roy's hatchback. We drive across the street, which I'm not allowed to do. I was not allowed to leave John's. I shouldn't have been at John's in the first place. And Roy goes, "Okay, here's how it works." He hands us these characters, and he started with the classic, you are guarding a caravan, and then this dragon attacks it.
Yeah, I live there. I live in that environment.
Right?
I live in that encounter.
And so then John Chapman's mom calls Roy's home phone, because there weren't no cell phones.
There weren't no cell phones.
And he goes, Tim's dad called looking for him. And we all go, quick! We jump in the Roy's hatchback, right? And we still kind of like play a little bit on the way and are like rolling. And when we get to John Chapman's house, my dad is sitting there waiting for me. And so I got in trouble, and I wasn't able to go back over John's for a while, but that was my first taste of like, this guy was making this game up. I've got to learn more about this. Nice. And probably within the month, I bought all of the advanced D&D books, the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Monster Manual. And then a literal week later, 3rd edition came out. And I'm like, why didn't the guy at the bookstore tell me that?
Because you're about to fork over $200.
That's why.
It's like, ooh.
So that's how I got into gaming. And then from there, the rest is just history. Nice.
That's an awesome story. Mine isn't as cool of a story, and there's not as much risk of me getting in trouble with my parents.
No, fair point.
So when I was a kid, I played video games. I played football, baseball, a lot of sports, tennis. But the thing that I loved to do the most was play pretend. I would just go out in the backyard. I read a lot of Calvin and Hobbes when I was a kid, so I loved the idea of Calvin ball. I remember that just waking something up in my brain, the fact that this little kid had made up a single player sport for him and his stuffed tiger. And I was like, man, I could do anything. It's just a weird thought. Like I could make up anything I wanted. And of course my friends would jump in on it too. We would play pretend in the backyard and go run on the golf course. And this whole field filled with grasshoppers was actually filled with landmines. It was just stuff everything we wanted, we could create with our brains. And one time I'm in middle school and my buddy Justin, he shows me this book called Werewolf the Apocalypse. And I can't remember the exact moment where I got it, what role playing was, but I remember this moment realizing that, oh, it's like what I love to do, but with some rules. Like, so it's not just like, oh, I shot you. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Well, why am I still standing here? No, it's like, no, I got dice to decide or whatever. Coin flips, it didn't matter. And so I rolled up my character this, why am I forgetting right now? Silverfang, werewolf, that for the first time I had ever done anything like that. And I just walked around school with that character sheet on me, thinking, realizing I had discovered something that I needed and never realized I needed until I found it. And I guess the rest was history. It actually was another year or two before I played again, and I played AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and my best friend at the time is and actually kind of still now, his mom ran the game for myself, him, and his dad.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Wow.
It was
that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember this moment. I said, I'm gonna yell as loud as I can in this cave, because I just loved the idea that I could do that.
Yeah.
And she rolled a die and said, all right, everything starts to rumble. And I said, no, I don't do it. Never mind. I'm sorry. I didn't do that. I take it back.
Too late, Parker.
She let me take it back, but I never yelled again. Like, I never made that mistake. I remember like shooting a potion out of, like, when the big bad pulled a potion out of his coat, and I thought, oh God, this guy's going to heal himself. Like, you just know. I shot it out of his hand. It was the coolest experience of my life. And it all started because this one kid was like, hey, look at this werewolf book. And so I think that's where it started for me, for sure. It was werewolf. But the first time I had ever really played was 3rd edition in high school.
Those are both fantastic stories. Most of the people who have seen these videos before have already heard my background, but I learned to play in the Boy Scouts. My Scoutmaster actually taught me how to play with several of my fellow friends who were scouts along with me, and several of those people I actually still play with today.
That's
still
cool.
Like
That's really cool.
25 years later. And I've been running a home group in my house, usually hosted, for the last 19 years. We meet on a weekly basis. And again, like I said, most of them are still the people that I learned to play with in Boy Scouts, and now they're spouses. So we're a really, really close group. We go to each other's birthday parties and all that kind of stuff all the time.
That's so awesome.
So
How many
yeah.
people have you had to kick out of the group?
I've never had to kick anyone out of the group.
19 years, not a casualty.
We have had several people who have left the group. College girls, people disappear. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. We did have a fracturing moment where there was a couple of the players that decided that they wanted to go somewhere else. But it's been a really, really strong and fantastic influence in my life. And that's one of the reasons why I find this hobby so fantastic. Because the friendships that I have forged through playing it are the strongest friendships that I've forged in my entire life.
And they start instantly sometimes. Like when you meet someone who plays D&D, and you're like, the moment you make that connection, you're like, oh, we get each other.
Yeah.
Like I could talk to this person.
What do you play?
Anything. Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing a ranger right now. Da, da, da. Oh, cool. You going 2-weapon fighting? Boom.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we have everything in common.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. And it's one of those things where it's impossible to explain to someone. So when you find somebody who does already understand, then it's a lot of the bridge is already built.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yep. That's a really good way to put it.
That's a really good way to put it.
Right. Awesome. Okay, well, moving right along.
Well, that's it for Player Agency, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Much, guys.
Rasmus.
Happy Good Friday.
I do, actually. Nice.
There's a lot of terms that kind of get thrown around in the community, one of which is player agency. So I think in the beginning here, it's necessary to kind of define exactly what that term delineates in your minds.
I think there's a perspective about tabletop role-playing games that is understandably very easy to adopt, which is that the game master has something and they show it to the players, and the players operate within those restrictions, within that story, within that dungeon, within the map that you're putting out there. The players operate within those fences, those walls that you built. And player agency it's a lot of things. But I'm trying not to give a non-answer that like, listen, whatever you want it to be, baby. It's the loosening of the reins a little bit. It's the but what does that mean? It's the ability to allow players to make decisions within that framework that you might have not expected.
Sure.
It's the ability to take those decisions and 3, 4, 5 sessions down the road, bring them back to say, hey, you changed the world because now this person whose brother you killed, now she wants to kill you. And so now she's on your tail.
Yep.
So it's giving the players an opportunity to step in your shoes a little bit and alter the game.
Yeah, it's almost like the player. You're allowing the players to test the fences. They're defining kind of where those boundaries stop, and giving you a lot of the material to figure out more in-depth information about your world.
Yep, I think so too.
Yeah,
Is there something you'd add, Tim?
Well, I was going to say that I don't want to be pedantic, but
I do.
To me, the game master is a player, and so my agency is I bring my piece of the puzzle, but you also need to bring yours. And so what I've learned is, this guy and I and Matt and James, we write books. And I think the reason why we've lasted in writing books is because we are willing to take each other's advice and ideas and hold them above our own. And there are things that I love that never make it into the book because at the end of the day, their ideas are better for the book. And so taking that same idea, what I'm doing when I sit down for 4 hours with anyone is we're going to tell a story together. And yeah, it's a game, but I love telling stories. That's what I love to do. And the thing I love the most about role-playing games is it's like all of the fun of watching a movie with half the work.
Yep.
And so for me, the agency comes into play where it's like we're entering a social agreement that all of us are telling this story together. And we all get to try to do stuff we like. based on what we agree upon early on, which is that session 0. But to me, it's that same thing where your idea of what's fun should be as important to me as a game master as my idea of what's fun, and vice versa. You have to understand that what's fun for me as a game master might not always be fun for you as a player, but we work it out and we build this really balanced thing by taking turns having fun. And to me, that's agency. To me, if I had to define player agency, it's doing what someone else likes so that you can have their fun with them.
I like that. I think actually, and this might be carrying it a little bit outside the definition, but that's kind of like, I feel that way when, if we're in the Provokers and I'm playing Holly and Holly does something, and Christoph, you have him ask Holly about that thing.
Yes. That's
player agency with another player. Like, it has nothing to do with the game master.
Right.
That's the elaborating of a story. That's the pushing of what story are we going to tell today? You really never know, because this player might ask this other player, or character might ask another character a question about where their weapon came from, and that creates a whole new dialogue. Maybe that's not the best example, but it's a very big definition, and I'm looking to tackle it all today right here with Jeremy Lilly.
Yeah, I've always likened the way I view being a player in a game to being an actor in an ensemble on stage. Not only does role-playing and acting have improv in common ground, but I also think that when you are a part of a game, you should understand your role within the group, within not only the out-of-character group, the dynamic at the table, but also your role within the game. Like, are you the comic relief? Are you the straight and narrow hero? Whatever that is. And you find your place within the narrative that way. And then it's your job to make your best attempt at playing that single role. It's okay to step out of it every once in a while. But if you're going to be the hero, then play the hero and do everything that you can to be the hero, because that's what the narrative needs to be better. Just like in stage, if you're part of the chorus, yeah, you might be bummed because you didn't get the lead role. But if you make yourself the best chorus member that you can, then the entire show is going to be better for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And player agency, I think, is a great way for you to define that, to kind of take ownership of that role that you're going to take on the mantle of, and expand it to the furthest reaches that you can kind of go within the narrative.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think if you want to break it down, at least in my opinion, I feel like you could also define player agency as, if someone ends a game and they say, I feel like I didn't have any player agency, I think you could translate that into, I didn't get to do what I think is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really what that translates into. So to me, when you sit down at my table, I want that from you just as much as you want that from me. So I think that it's important to go in understanding, hey, we're all here to have fun, and we're going to tell this story together. So to me, I'm like, hey, all right. And that's when I, quote unquote, throw it to someone. Hey, all right, what are you doing? That is their opportunity to say, here's what I think would be fun right now. And by me letting that be open-ended, I let them kind of tell me what they think is fun. Now, it's my job to set up the, like you mentioned, kind of fencing it in, to not constrict them, but to make sure it doesn't step on that person's fun.
Sure.
And that, or mine, or kind of go, all right, cool, hey, yeah. Or if someone wants to chime in, hey, you know what I think would be cool? Again, translate into, you know what would be fun for me right now?
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think if you kind of go at it with that mindset, that's the games I love to play.
There's also something about building those restrictions as the game master, where you're not building restrictions, you're building places where the players can stress test them. By giving the players a display case with a relic in it, you're giving them something that they can play with if they want. How are they going to do it? Are they going to ask about it? Is the rogue going to try to steal it? Probably. And when that happens, are you as the GM going to say no? Are you going to say no? Or are you going to, and what's even worse than saying no is making the alarms go off. And all of a sudden there are guards and they ask, okay, I think we can take him. And you say, no, you can't take him. You look around and you know for a fact there's no fight. You're getting arrested tonight. Right. And it's like, okay, you've removed the agency. And listen, I've fallen into that trap. I've done similar things as a GM. I was going to maybe mention a story called Ian's White Dragon, which is not a euphemism. Ian's White Dragon is a story that we were running a game, and Ian was it was a one shot per se, and one of our characters, Mike, he was playing a cleric, and the one shot culminated in this white dragon, this elder white dragon appearing, manifesting before us, and Mike's cleric did something, like used an ability. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't anything like, I'm going to kill this dragon. It wasn't anything that could bring it down, but it kind of rebuked it a little bit. And Ian was like, what? And he took the character sheet and he couldn't believe that Mike had any sort of ability whatsoever that could affect this huge, massive, ancient beast. And maybe for good reason. He just had a different idea in his head of what dragons can do. But he said, oh, I don't like that. I don't like how, they've really changed things with this edition or something like that. And I remember thinking, so I guess at the end of the day, the dragon, he said, no, that doesn't do anything. It doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't do anything to the dragon. You might think that's weird or interesting or whatever. And all I could think of was, what's more interesting? A dragon saying, nope, your ability doesn't affect me, or the dragon being affected by an ability and saying, interesting. You're different. This character's different. No one's ever affected me in that way. Like, you don't have to fell the beast, you can just insert a little bit of, like, the big bads should be surprised at what the players' characters can do. And allowing the player characters to do that is allowing player agency. And that's Ian's White Dragon.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of putting it. It's control, but it's not total control. It's, again, it's very much kind of an ownership of the story that's being told.
Yeah, and I feel like, just very quickly, again, Mike's never going to tell that story in a positive light.
Yep.
That's never going to be what was cool? That's always going to be like, hey, you know what sucked?
Yep.
Because what we have to remember is that we are not Scorsese.
No.
We are trying
I'm
I mean, you are.
Yeah,
you are. But what we're all trying to do is we're all trying to tell a story together, but it is still a game. And who wants to have a cool ability and be like, no, that doesn't work on this boss. And you're like, cool, well, that's my one thing. So let me just slink into the background until this is over. Yeah,
exactly. The game master, you brought everything to this table, and I brought this character sheet, and clearly the thing I brought doesn't matter.
Right.
So we're playing your game.
Yeah, there are ways around that.
I really like that you said that will never be a positive, good D&D story. And it could have been. It could have been the coolest D&D story.
You just told it as a cautionary tale.
Yep.
Right.
I'll never forget it as that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I will absolutely admit that I fall back on a railroad a lot as a DM. I am very happy with a lot of the story beats that I kind of come up with, but I have learned to adapt and change my story and where it's going on the fly, and still keep those beats that I want as a part of the game, and just use them in a different way or in a different place.
Yep. Agreed.
A lot of that happens between games too. I think, people think on the fly as in improvising during the game, but I think, the session ends and you think, well, hold on, this beat I had, this next beat, that's a really cool beat, but it doesn't really jive with the decision that the paladin made this game, or it doesn't, or I've come up with a cooler one. Swap it out. That's agency, that just being able to change the story and lay, well, you say this all the time, lay the tracks as the train's going.
As the train's going, you're like,
yep, like a Looney Tune.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of my stories very much kind of adhere to the adage of, like, the destination is not what's important. Like, the journey is really where the great story is told. So, if I know that I want them to fight this one bad guy in the specific place, okay, I just have that and just leave it there. I don't worry about how they're going to get to that point or what's going to lead them there, other than just other beats like that. And the really great storytelling is whenever they get really close, and then I have to figure out how they're going to get from here to here. It's that journey between the 2 points that really the best story comes from.
Yep, I agree with that. I also found a hack where I can control the bad guys. So what I'll start doing is I make the bad guys care about what the players are doing. And that's a really easy magnet. Rather than trying to fish them into, hey, don't you care? He's burning down this village.
That's so smart.
I flip it around and I'm like, okay, cool. What do you love the most? They're like, oh, well, I love this deity and blah, blah, blah. Cool. Bad guy, super against that, really interested in what you're doing. Now I have a reason for the bad guy to come to them. That matters. And it's like, look, that's a dial I can turn all day.
Yep. There's something that Matt has mentioned, and it's something that I struggle with, but I know that you're really good at now, and Matt's really good at, and Jeremy, I know that you're really good at, is the way he phrased it was prep problems, not solutions. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, seriously, I struggle with it all the time. I'm always finding myself grasping these cool ways to beat something. And I'm like, God, but that's railroad, that's shoehorning, you know? Mm-hmm. And so breaking free from those chains it's a perpetual goal of mine.
Sure. And the thing I would say is try to come up with something you can't think of a solution for, and then be like, hey guys, because then it's like, figure that one out. And then when they come up with anything half cool, you're like, all right, that's the way. Yeah.
I remember a story I heard of Mike Krahulik of Penny Arcade was playing in a game run by somebody. It was not recorded. It wasn't like an Acquisitions Incorporated thing. And it's just a story. It's just words. So who knows? It could be a lie. But basically, the GM, they were planning like a heist.
Yeah.
Or like a bank heist. And so they had made this huge map of the bank and put it on the table and said, all right, players, you have 30 minutes. And then the GM left and gave the player and watched an episode of something. I don't know. Gave the players 30 minutes to decide how the heist was going to go. And according to Krahulik, he had at the end of it, the players not only engaged in a really fun, exciting heist, but they had that Ocean's 11 moment at the end where the thing they were escorting out was actually not the thing, and the thing was actually in the bag the whole time. Yeah. And so and the GM was surprised. And of course, that's a fairy tale dream come true. Yeah. I have a hard time believing that happened because I've never experienced something like that in a game. But that is the coolest idea, to give the players something like a map or a diagram or a code and just have them come up with how they defeat it.
Yeah, I ran a one shot here at home one time for two people, two of my buddies that came over one night, kind of last minute, where I built a cathedral out of it's 3-dimensional gaming terrain. I built a 3-dimensional floor plan for the cathedral out of these dungeon tiles, and I told them, okay, here's what's been happening. You are defending this cathedral from an attacking force. You've had this number of time to barricade the entrances and make a plan. So go ahead, come up with that however you want, and then whenever you're ready, we'll start the game. That's awesome. It was fantastic. It was one of the funnest things that I've ever done before.
That's amazing. It's so cool.
That's really awesome. I'm envious. I'd think that was cooler, except I hate you.
Fair enough. All right. So moving right along. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about player agency and kind of why it's important, where its place is, but how much is too much? Like, when does player agency go too far and maybe even become like abuse?
Well, I'm a player. So when your agency overlaps my fun too much or anyone else's fun, we all have agency. And it's like this cool little circle around us. And you can press in and get it all close together, and it can have like Venn diagram. But if your circle starts to encompass everybody else and theirs disappears, it's too much.
I think that's really smart. When you have, and a lot of this happens with power players, not power gamers, but players that during other people's turns, they're kind of like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. Or, oh, are you sure you want to? And even their character decisions might be like, oh, they're they're standing first watch. All right, I'm gonna mess with them or something like that. It's just like, this isn't really fun for everybody anymore. And those are kind of conversations that might even happen post game. I have a bad reason that agency is bad.
Tell me.
Because I was gonna run for a while a Star Wars game. I wanted to run episode 1, 2, and 3, my versions, like how I would have done it if I created the prequels.
Sure.
And immediately I encountered the obstacles to doing that, because if I write out how my 3 episodes go, the players have no agency, right? You're like, hey, Tim, you're playing Anakin, so make sure at the end of this you turn to the dark side, something like that. But everyone was going to play like, Anakin, Obi-Wan, different characters that didn't appear in the prequels that would have, and it was a really cool idea, I thought.
I think so too.
But after a while, it occurred to me that that's too much agency to make the idea happen, and that's why it's a bad reason,
right? Because
I shouldn't ever, really try to shoehorn that idea. But if you're really trying to go for something like that, or the players are fine with you running a one shot that's very specific, that tells, like a lot of times they might say, hey, run a one shot that's like a prequel to our campaign, how we got to day one. Yep. And you're going to be like, okay, well, listen, there's some player agency that you're not going to have. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We just want to see how it panned out, how everything worked out. Then as long as everyone's okay with that, you're good. But otherwise, I had to change my mentality to, okay, I'm going to put these characters in, and we're going to see what the first episodes are going to be. Yep. We're going to see how it turns out.
Yeah. Because again, the definition, I think, at least to me, it's, hey, what do I think is fun right now? That's really, if we don't want to talk about agency, it's like, hey, what do I think is fun right now? And if your, hey, what do I think is fun right now, starts swallowing up other people's too often, then it's like, hey, that's too much. Yep. Because I want to have some fun too. Mm-hmm. What I think is fun right now is this, and yours is eating it alive. So that's kind of the easy way I would try to define it. And that includes the DM.
So here's a stereotype where player agency is too much, or there's too much player agency. And I just want to throw this out there to ask the question, is it really a bad thing, or how can you make it a good thing? But, you've prepared east, west, and south, and the players say, oh, let's go north. Or you've created this world, and this big, beautiful world, and in this tiny corner, you're like, oh, and also, there are other worlds, other planes and stuff like that, but you can only really access them in this city. We're going to go to that city. Let's go see the other planes. It's like, okay, well, are you able as a GM to say, can we not? Or like, is that allowing too much agency? Are you kind of obligated to say, well, listen, this is what they want to do for fun. This is what they're like, where their heads are at. I'm here to serve, or something like that. Is that what do you think on that, Jeremy?
I think for me, that's the point that I've gotten to as a GM now, is where I'm perfectly okay with telling people, hey, that's not what I really was having in mind. That's not what I really was kind of seeing this story go. So would it be okay if we decided something different?
Or if we played a board game tonight and give me another week to plan it out or something. That's
exactly. And I think that communication, that candid communication, it breaks the stigma of, I think sometimes as DMs, we get this idea that we kind of got to do it perfectly. And it's our job to hold the whole thing together. And while we're like the captain of the team, you still can't have a one-man team.
Yep.
And so I think, Jeremy, that's a really mature way to do it, which is, okay, cool. And both of those, I think, are really good ways. One is, hey, I don't have that ready, and I can get that ready. The other hack that I'll do, and this might be taking away player agency, but if you have west, south, and east prepared, I will happily make south north, and you will never know.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like, and that's the whole. There's an argument online of like the quantum ogre and taking when it's like, no, because we're all telling a story, and you never see Jack Bauer on 24 taking a dump. Because that's not fun. So if you want to go the road where Jack Bauer takes a dump, I'm like, look, we're just going to pretend that happens off screen, and you're going north.
I imagine he goes into the bathroom and someone else is like, "Really, Jack?
He goes,
We're on hour 11.
this turd is a terrorist."
Make it quick."
I don't even know.
I'll start my counting.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's the kind of situation you can also get yourself into, which is where I usually start to say that yes, no is a good answer sometimes. Say you're running a Gloam game, and somebody starts talking about how they walk into a store and you tell them, okay, so find something that or describe something that you see. And they're like, oh, there's 10 kegs of black powder and there's no one around. You're like, okay, well, wait a second. Like, I think you've taken the agency too far in that situation.
Sure.
So when stuff like that happens, what are some tips or tricks as a game master where you could kind of help rein that back in without being a dick about it?
So, what was that?
Oh, you heard her. Let me turn that off. He heard system sounds through his headphones. He heard,
It happened right in the middle of my and it was almost the same pitch too. So I was like, wow.
and I was
didn't
like,
realize I had it in me.
well, and I thought, did he stump you? I thought, I was like, I didn't realize. James would yell at me right now. You didn't turn your system sounds off.
So here's it's almost such a cliche answer that it's a non-answer, but something that people might say is, allow there to be 10 kegs of black powder, but make it so the black powder is cursed, or make it so there's some cost to taking it. Or one of the things I remember, Lloyd Collins was talking about his Song of Ice and Fire game, or actually might have been Nico Dawson's Song of Ice and Fire game, where the players found a trove of treasure, just so much gold, and it came into question that like there's no way you're carrying all of this. Gold is heavy, like money's heavy, and also if anyone sees it on you, people are going to ask questions, and in a place like Westeros, you're going to get killed.
The hound will hit you on the head and take it.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to get robbed, and so that was a very realistic problem to carrying the money. So it's almost like, yeah, give them the 10 kegs of black powder, but how the heck are you going to move it around? You're going to roll it down the street. Someone's going to arrest you for it. Someone's going to fight you for it. It might spill out. That thing, if that's near you in a fight, that's going to be as much of a danger to you as it is to any of your enemies. Right. So maybe and a lot of this comes with the week between games, really thinking about different ways to make things cost something. And that would be the go-to, again, so cliche, it's a non-answer sort of answer, is that make something, if they say there's a Vorpal sword, what do you see? Oh, I see 9 Vorpal swords. Okay, why are they illusions? Come up with reasons why they're not actually there, or reasons why grabbing them would be a problem.
Sure. I also think too, like exactly what you're saying, what I've started to try to do is only directly address or correct something when it comes into play. So if they want there to be 10 barrels of black powder there and no one's around, okay. And then what? Because most of the time they're just like, well then, I didn't think I was going to get this far. What else is in here? And so now if that comes into play and they say, okay, I want to take all 10 of these, blah, 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 etc. What I would probably do is concoct a way where, okay, when the rubber meets the road and they try to light these things and they explode, well, some of it was wet. So now a roll for me to see how much of this black powder is actually working, etc. But I kind of wait to see what they're really getting at. And if it's someone who just keeps doing that over and over, as long as it's not disruptive to everyone else's fun or agency, I'll kind of just let them have their fun, talking about all the crazy stuff they're seeing. But then how much is that actually affecting the game, really? Nice. Are they just describing crazy stuff and then it falls away and the other players are kind of ignoring it? It's fine. I would really kind of let that slide until they said, I want to blow up the city.
Yep.
And then I go, okay.
Okay, we've created a trilogy of one-shots.
Right. Let's pause this and say, okay, or whatever. The black powder is mostly wet. So I guess I will wait and see, because their way of fun might actually just be describing crazy stuff because they don't have that in the real world.
Yep.
But then how much is that actually affecting the other players? And so
there's also a difference between saying, what do you see, and what symbol do you see on the door?
Smart.
Like, really, you seeing the agency as a choke that you can dial in.
Yeah.
And actually, I recommend people really just experimenting with player agency. Start with really small decisions. What color is their hair? You know, what kind of accent do they have? What race is this character that you're talking to? That's actually a bigger one, because they can pick some fantastical race that doesn't exist in your world or whatever. And
right. Tabaxi.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, okay.
That's an aboleth running the tavern here. Oh, great. And then slowly but surely, as the players get used to your style of specifically asking them, you know, what do you see? They know which boundaries to operate in.
Yes.
They kind of feel it, and the group kind of is molded around those decisions, I think.
So to play devil's advocate for a moment, what happens when somebody willingly, repeatedly, maybe even steps outside of those boundaries? What if you're playing a fantasy game and somebody starts describing the gun that they're walking around with?
Is this player the only person at the table that's having fun after a few sessions? Here's the answer that's so cliche, it's a non-answer. But if that's the case, I ask him, listen, it's not working out. And this is why. And if this is something that that we can't fix, then maybe you come up just every third Sunday and we'll play a board game that day or something like that. And I know that sounds harsh, but I have no problem having that group conversation, because I live out in the middle of nowhere. When people are driving out to come game, they're driving for 45 minutes both ways. And so I don't want these people to be taking at least 4 hours out of their day to come out and do something that's not fun, because eventually those people who aren't the source of the issue are going to start leaving. They're going to start saying, I can't make it out tonight. Sorry, I got a thing. Or I'm going to go do an escape room or something like that.
Yeah.
And so having that conversation with that player is, I think, important. And tact is important. I wish I were better at that sometimes, but being able to tell someone that they're a problem and have their response be, okay, all right, yeah, you're right, and sure, I'm gonna fix that. That's not easy.
Yeah, and so I think intent has a lot to do with it, which can become very tricky, because sometimes the person you're describing, they don't realize what they're doing. Sometimes that's just fun for them. They're like, cool. They're used to playing video games where you can kind of just do whatever, or there's, different patches to play, StarCraft, and like, they're just thinking, I just want to make stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think intent has a lot to do with it. And then having a conversation with them that, hey, listen, actually, there are no guns in this world, but what do you like about that? What do you like about the fact that there's a gun? Like, the intent, what's the motive? And if they're like, well, I didn't just, okay, cool. Let me tell you a little bit about a magic wand.
That's smart.
You know what I mean? It's like, if I kind of try to figure out, why do you think that's cool? And if it's just that they like modern stuff in this time period, that's not for this campaign. And we can maybe work on something where there are other elements like that in there. But I think intent is where I would try to boil it down to, and then distill it into, well, what do you say? You say gun. You keep finding all this stuff. Why do you like modern stuff? Well, because X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, X, Y, and Z exists just in this form.
I want to have a shootout. Well, listen, magic missile. You can have holsters on your hips and put wands in them.
Exactly. But if it becomes like, well, I don't know, I don't care, whatever, then it's like, okay, then.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. So, hey, listen, we're not trying to have the same kind of fun. Your agency's overriding mine.
Tim's answer was the smart answer of my brash, get the hell out of the.
No, your answer was probably what I would do if I tried that way first. And then it was like, nah, I'd be like, yep, but you're not for this group.
Try that first, though, because you're right. Because people are like, well, I just want to have fun in this way. And chances are the person who's making it less fun for everybody else is just trying to have fun. And they might not know how. Like, also ask yourself, are they new to role playing?
Sure.
Because if so, they just really might not get the agreement around the table. They might not get what it means to have player agency and yet to light a match and not set a forest on fire. You know, that's,
That's
like,
a great
I don't
way to
really
put
get it. I scream in the reverberating cave. Okay,
Right.
it collapses. Wait, never mind.
Right.
Fantastic. So, kind of on the other side of things, are there ways that you as a player find yourself checking your agency occasionally and trying to fall more in line with what you understand that the GM is trying to accomplish? Are there ways to kind of accomplish that? How do you watch out for that and kind of navigate those waters as best you can?
I know exactly what you're talking about. So, as a game master, I empathize with the game master. And so, yes, 100%. I feel like I'm on the level. So when a puzzle's presented before me, these are what I call I'm going to play along moments. Meaning, I understand what you're trying to do with this puzzle. And even if I figure it out right away, because I know it or I saw it online or I get it, I get what you're doing. Same thing if you throw me a hint or two like, yeah, you know, they look very forlorn. They look very, I'm like, oh, cool. My character relates to that. They're throwing me a narrative bit here. Let me play into that. So I think that I'm a very self-aware player, and I very much like for when I play with you or I play with in like Matt's Provoker games, I know Matt's style. So much like musicians improvising, when Matt throws me something, I feel like I know what his intent is. So I put my own spin on my answer to that. And I feel like he does a really good job of letting me. So when he throws out a scene, there are times where he'll do something very deep in character where it's like, hey, we're going to talk about meeting your brother who was murdered. And he and I don't plan it. He just says, tell me a couple things about your brother. But I know what's going on here. I know that my brother is murdered. I know that it's a mystery. I know I'm trying to solve it. So when he starts the session with a flashback, as a GM, I know, okay, cool. This is a connection with my brother. This is to revive that and explore the relationship to give meaning to solving the mystery. And I think that only just comes with experience. But I absolutely play into it. If I feel like I know what a GM's doing, I will totally do that.
I think that's really smart. I think a lot of being a GM is, especially in the case of the Provokers, is a really perfect example. Is the GM saying, all right, this is the experience we're going to have. This is the environment we're going to role play in. We're going to, whether that's a dead brother or you meeting your long lost dad again or something like, this is the experience we're going to have. And we'll see where it leads. We'll see how it goes. We'll see where the role playing takes us. And I don't want to say that's learned through over time. It definitely is. It definitely is. Sure. Like over time with the same group, you get that used to start molding into each other. But I think that it's all about striking a balance and creating those broad stroked ideas and scenarios to put out on the table and have the players just have at with you and each other is the perfect way to present player agency, because you're finding that balance and pushing and pulling a little bit.
Sure, like, I totally agree. And I think Matt is excellent at, if you watch every Provoker session, like a clock, you will see him focus on one character per session. And
it's like an episode of Lost.
Exactly. It's like a good episode of TV where you're like, okay, this is the dice episode. And everyone has a good supporting role in it. And we all have moments and all that stuff. But the story arc, the progress, that thing that he prepares to progress that character is usually just one. And I feel like that works so well. And I don't feel like that takes away agency because we all get a turn in the rotation.
I think that's one of the reasons why understanding and embracing tropes is such an important thing.
Yeah.
Because that way you don't have to spoil the surprise before the scene happens. But once you start leading into the scene and you're playing on the tropes, then people understand where it's going because they've seen this story before. They've seen this kind of scene before, and they understand where to step in and fill a certain key part of that scene.
Agreed.
Trope is one of those words that's one of my favorite words, and I hate that there's such a negative connotation to that word by so many people, because they think it means boring, cliche, bland, and it's no, that's a signpost.
Yes.
You can come up with any reason you want why Dragonborn exists. The Dragonborn is the trope. Like, you can come up with a whole new variety of ways for why trope exists.
Yeah. And I feel like trope, if you really boil it down, it is defined as the thing you really want to see, but may have a hard time admitting.
Dude, I'm so on board with that.
It's like, you're just like, oh, I really want it to end this way, because you just know in your soul, you're wired to see a story end that way.
And in the age of internet theories and everybody being able to talk about stuff, it's so difficult to watch Game of Thrones or Star Wars or Lost or something. Like, Lost was the first one because Lost came out right when Facebook was coming out and stuff. So it's hard to, like you're saying, like, I really want this to happen in the TV show, but if it did, I'd be like, oh, well, that was boring. That was a trope, that was cliche. But it's like, come on, it's okay if the thing that all the fans are predicting is going to happens.
Right.
And so anyway, that's a little bit broader scoped, but I like that way of putting it.
Yeah, for me, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a trope is worth 1,000 pictures. Like, it's a shorthand that I can drop a sentence, a phrase, and all of a sudden, I didn't have to spend 2 minutes describing exactly what I was kind of setting out for you.
Yep.
I dropped enough flags that somebody else picked it up and said, okay, I understand what we're doing, and started throwing out additional flags that are still a part of that trope.
Yeah,
and taking the trope and then just kind of putting a little bit of a twist on it. Once it's established, once everybody is on board, then you start applying the twist and showing how it's different and new and fresh.
Right.
So is one trope worth 1 million words? Or wait, 100,000 words? I'm just trying to do the math in my head. I'm trying
the math checks out.
The math checks out. It's 1 billion words.
1 billion words.
Do you want us to trope it?
For one trope.
Put a stamp on it.
Yep. I don't have much time for that many words.
So, we have not yet gotten to any of the questions.
I thought that those were the questions.
I kind of started thinking those were the questions.
These are the questions that I had put aside to ask. I do have one more, and I'd like to ask it, and then we can dive into some of the questions at least. If you guys are game for going later, then we can certainly chew through all of them, but I leave that up to you guys.
I'm game, but it's your house.
I'm game. No, as long as our spouses are okay and my kids are fine, then I'm good to go there. Then there is a cake waiting for us, but I mean,
oh God,
by all means.
But no. I think we definitely have time. I think what we'll have to do is probably speed round it, where maybe we don't both answer the same question. You maybe answer another.
Sure, that's smart.
Though. Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like really works in theory.
Right.
Works on paper.
Much like player agency.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
All of this.
Guest agency. Okay, so the question that I have that I want to ask before we start in on the audience questions is for Barker specifically. So something that you're known for, and you've talked about it a little bit already tonight, is for playing dice, and then later his daughter Holly, both in the Provokers campaign. And as I understand it, you drew from your experiences as a stepfather for some of this. So are there other ways that this relationship has influenced your gaming in particular?
So for the, I'll be honest, I was wondering what the question was going to be. I was like trying to figure out, okay, what is that? Because I'm a big fan, Jeremy, of saying, yeah, just shoot them at us during the session. Don't give me questions beforehand. Woo! Let's go. For anyone who doesn't know, my wife was married previously, and her husband had 2 kids. And I'm gonna just leave this very short and sweet. He passed away, and she went from having a family of 4 and a happy life to being completely alone the next day. And I couldn't get it out of my head that that was the most tragic thing that could happen to a person. And I still can't really. And so I wanted to that's usually how I game. Is I'll put something that's real into a character, and I'll just kind of see how it unfolds and see how the GM creates a scenario for me and for others, and I'll you know, I was playing as Dice, and who's this character whose child Holly is taken away, and my stepdaughter in that first campaign was Holly. That was just really poured into that. And then, we go through this amazing arc where Dice finally meets her again, but he's a different person. And it's really, there's a lot of, in every session, there's in every character, there's bits of me in there and bits of other people in there. And the most interesting thing that happened, though, is in the new Provokers, Bleak Wrath, I wanted to play as Holly and really put myself into the shoes of my stepdaughter, the stepdaughter fighting. And my dad died in the midst of this. And then all of a sudden I found out that I was Holly. I was now this character without a dad. And I had to figure out, and it was very easy to put those emotions into the game. And because I knew, I was like, I know how it feels, how everything was very fresh. And gaming is always a very cathartic. I almost said therapeutic, and that's not really the case, but cathartic experience. That's the perfect word for it. I think that and you might have to re-ask the question here, Jeremy, but when it comes to using real world experiences and real world people to determine outcomes in a game, and determine not necessarily outcomes, but determine agency and how my players might act in a game, I don't really know any other way. And I sometimes do it without realizing it. Jake Norman ran for us a Sphere game in Dragon Grin. Yep. And your character asked mine, okay, what's something that your character would give me advice-wise? And I said, if you find yourself in a fair fight, poor planning.
Yeah.
And it was like it came off really cool and awesome. That's something my dad used to say. Like, it's just something that was on my head during this time. And it was, sometimes I do it without even realizing it. Now rephrase the question. Did that answer the question?
No, it answered it beautifully. And I don't think that I could agree anymore. I think some of the strongest moments role-playing are when you have invested yourself emotionally in what's going on. And when you have a true real world emotion that has been struck by a chord, you can't help but react. And you're not acting, you're reacting. And that's one of the best notes that I've ever gotten in theater was, if you find yourself acting on stage, you're doing it wrong. You should be listening and reacting to everything that's going on, and just stay in character while you're doing it. That's the whole secret. And if you understand your character well enough, and especially in like a role-playing game where you have put a lot of yourself, even subconsciously, put a lot of yourself into your character, if you recognize that and be okay with making yourself emotionally vulnerable, then the rewards are astounding.
Nice. You can improvise while knowing the lines at the same time. I think that's really solid input about acting there, Jeremy, actually, like on stage. I was thinking of the story of the actor who plays Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, and how is a very famous story about how he's killing the six-fingered man, and he says, I want my father back, you son of a bitch, and he kills him. And that actor's dad actually died from cancer, and so he channeled that into his acting, and he said, for a moment there I had my dad back. For a moment there I had it. And I felt the same way when Matt created the scenario, presented the experience where Holly went to the Bleak and met Dice one last time. Yeah. It was like this, it's perfect.
And can I just say this too, for anybody listening, if this sounds super way over your head and you're like, whoa, what? It's something that involves a lot of trust and players who know each other very well. And so if this sounds extremely foreign to you, I would not try it.
Yeah. Good point.
Right. So we are best friends who have been gaming together for years and know each other very well. I mean, we are the best of friends. And so we trust each other with these these moments,
heavy things,
are these very heavy, very deep emotional things. And so I just would warn any game master that's like, oh, cool. Hey, I remember Rick's dad died like a year ago. I'm going to throw that in the campaign. And Matt and Barker had conversations about this. There's a lot that goes on. And it wasn't just like, oh, cool, your mom has cancer. I'm going to throw that in the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm like, just take this advice.
That's really smart too, because especially a lot of people would have that happen and say, this isn't what I signed up for. Like,
I'm here to escape that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you're here to escape that, don't play the World of Darkness. Don't play Changeling the Lost is not the game for you.
Right.
But over time, again, like you're saying, as you get used to the group, as the group's playing with each other, all of a sudden you'll have one of those moments and no one will have planned for it.
Exactly.
And it's like, that's what role playing can be. Like, let them happen organically for sure.
Right. And if you don't let it happen organically, to bring it back to the topic, I believe you are violating agency because you are thrusting something upon me that I'm like, whoa, we are not there.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. Jump the shark a little bit.
Yeah.
And trust is actually a great point. It's actually something else I had made a note about under this. And because I think not unlike giving your players agency in the world, the situation of you becoming a stepfather is a situation where someone else has put the trust in you with their loved one, their child. And you're trusting someone to shape and grow your baby in both situations. Wow. So do you think that there's like credence to that analogy, or?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to give that simple answer, but yeah, I think so. I think that's on point.
No, that is. I was going to say that was actually a really well-worded way to succinctly put it.
All right. Well, cool. I think it's very admirable that you were able to do so. And from everything that I've seen, obviously it's, through posting on Facebook and just what I've heard you talk about and things like that. But it seems like you've done a fantastic job of becoming a father. Whenever, that choice wasn't necessarily made the way that it usually is for people. Mm-hmm. So those are big shoes that I would be terrified to fill. And I have a child, but making the decision to just all of a sudden become a parent overnight is daunting.
It was the easiest thing I've ever decided.
And listen, and that's beautiful to me.
I'm going to say something that parents, your loins are going to tighten here, but everyone's a parent because there are kids everywhere that look up to you when you don't realize it.
Yep.
Everyone's a teacher. Everyone's a mentor.
Yep.
And if you find yourself in a position where you don't think you're going to have kids, or you can't have kids, or something, like, these are very serious things. There are always kids out there, nephews, nieces, orphans, who will never have a forever home unless they meet you. And it's important that you ask yourself, human beings, we are what we leave behind. So who am I? Who am I going to be? Who am I going to leave behind? And carry your weight for the people around you.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky growing up. As I mentioned, not only did I have a very close nuclear family, but I was also in the Boy Scouts. So I was mentored by some fantastic people. I learned a lot of things from some very amazing people that I never would have had the chance to do so if I wasn't in an organization such as that. Now, again, not everybody that was in the program should have been. Some of them were not good mentors, but even that taught me something usually. And I understand how impactful it can be to have a positive relationship with an adult whenever you're a child. So you can learn a lot from people who, like you said, who aren't always your parents. And yeah, I think it's just really admirable. And it's something that I wanted to bring up. And especially because I felt like I could tie it to the topic and to gaming. So,
and I feel like you could say something to your child 10 times, but then when that cool uncle says it once, you're like, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
And so there's something about the weight of that. And so, yeah.
I actually sometimes I feel like more of an uncle than a parent, and so that's really that's super helpful. Like when the cool teacher, the cool uncle with the tattoo, like when they say the thing, yep.
And they're like, hey man, you should probably do that.
Also, be careful what you teach without realizing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. Very, very true. Yeah, you shouldn't lead by example by being somebody that you're not in public. You should just be a better person.
Dig it.
Period. Cool. Okay,
and be a better game master.
And
so, dang it, I was too late on that.
It was beautiful. No, it was a slow segue, but it was a segue. It was a big fat mall cop on it.
Segue.
Oh man, slow burn. Got me there.
Okay, so let's try to get to some of these questions if you guys are cool with it.
Cool. Yeah,
you go first.
All right. So the first question that I have is from Bill Fortney Jr. He says, how do you balance player agency with table balance if you have a bit of a spotlight hog at your table? Occasionally, a new player might use the term player agency to make everything about them. What tips might you have to handle that?
I would say that it's a matter of, at that point, if they're new, I would take them aside and I would ask them what their favorite TV show was. And then I would say, okay, well, who's your favorite character? And then I would say, okay, cool. So you know how in that show, how Tyrion has some awesome moments, but they also rotate around, and then Jon Snow has some moments, and then Daenerys has some moments, and there are even some episodes where Tyrion isn't in it at all, but that makes his appearance later all the better. I would see if they grokked that. If they were like, yeah, say, okay, well, this is kind of like that, where we want to rotate to keep everybody's story going. So what I want to do is I want you to have fun, but I want to make it more like that TV show that we love and give everybody a chance to have the same fun that you're having. Do you think that that's fair? And, oh, yeah. Okay, great. Well, then let's just try that and make sure we try to share time equally a little bit. And I'd go from there. If that didn't fix it, I'd probably do one more talk. And then if that didn't fix it, I would be like, hey, listen, I feel like you might be more of a play video games kind of guy, or maybe like you said, we play board games. Mm-hmm. You will still hang out. You come over, we play board games. So that, I think communication is the key, and showing them an example that's positive that they like. It's like, see, this thing you love does this exact thing. Mm-hmm. If it was Tyrion all the time, we would never see any other stories. And in fact, his story wouldn't matter.
Yep. Yeah. You also, the spotlight is actually something that you as the GM can control without really taking away agency. Like, is it too much of a trope or a cliche to start every session with a flashback? Because if you do that, you can say, this player, this is who we're looking at today. This one, not anyone else. We're talking about this person and we're zooming back into their past when they were in the military. This is going to be a battle scene. And so you're automatically creating a 15-minute experience for that player, where maybe if you want, everyone else plays minor characters that can improvise, or maybe not, but you're controlling the spotlight for that moment. And then especially when the rest of the story arc in the session kind of relates to that player or that character in certain ways. Yep. It's almost like most players, at least in my experience, I'm sure not all of them, almost fall in line with that. And they're like, okay, cool. This is kind of their, like you mentioned, this is a Dice episode. This is a Kristoff episode. This is a Gaharl episode, whatever. If you kick it off by pointing the spotlight only at one person, and then you hand the players the spotlight, even if that one player grabs it and is like, all right, I'm pointing it at myself. This is my spotlight.
Yeah.
You've at the very least, you've taken that other player and you've given them something that they won't forget, that's fun and exciting. And you can do that a few times every session too.
Yep. I wouldn't call it a spotlight. Maybe in this moment I'd call it a flare. But sometimes if I feel like someone hasn't been mentioned in a while, rather than always pointing a spotlight and going, well, what are you doing, Joe? I I take the situation at hand and I make it about them in some way, narratively. Example, you two are having a moment and you guys are arguing, and then a guard comes in and I say, and the sight of his sword makes the scar on your face itch. And I know that scar has to do with their family history, and so something that's important to them, I highlight it real quick, because then they get that endorphin hit of the spotlight, but it's not like, tell me a flashback of your family. I just kind of bring it in that way, and that seems to work really well.
Downtime when you're digging through books, like, all right, you flip through the book and you actually see your grandfather's name in it. It's like, oh, or this recipe was created by your great-great-great-grandmother, something like that. That's a little nugget that you can give to a player.
Little flair, not a spotlight, but it's a flare, and they're like, oh, cool. They get that endorphin rush of feeling involved.
That's cool, flair.
Absolutely. And I think somebody brought it up in chat just a little while ago. I think it's important to understand as a player when it's okay to take that spotlight, to be front and center, and when you need to be a support character. And not just sit back and get pissed off because you're not, the focus of the scene, or play on your phone. Find a way, if you're in the scene, find a way to have your character be involved in a supportive way that lifts and shines a light better on the person who it's meant for.
Yep. And that could be as simple as commenting to reinforce something that is a vibe or a mood or etc. So like, a really good example of this is the L5R games, Jeremy, that you just played in with Matt, and you did as well, the one with Lloyd and Taylor and right?
Yep.
Because of the way that game is structured, where there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface, and I think you were all great role players. So making a comment like, so-and-so would lower their eyes. That is a way to gesture and still act, even though it doesn't have anything specifically to do with you, but you're showing, oh, this person is revered, or, oh, I fear this person, or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that's a masterclass. The trilogy was great. And the one you're running too.
Thanks, man. One of the things that I did something, God, man, we're taking all these questions, and Jeremy, I'm sorry. I just need to shut up, but I won't. I just don't really know how. One of the things that I did in my 3 sessions was every session started with where all 4 players were playing people who weren't themselves. Like, all right, you're playing ninjas going aboard a ship to blow it up. Okay, you're playing slaves who are mining jade. Okay, you're playing, and just to see how that would pan out, and really giving them full agency on what decisions they made, and really not rolling very many dice, but just kind of having fun and introducing the story while allowing all the players to play. I found that was it was so easy with this group because everyone is so good at sharing that spotlight. But it was, I imagine for new groups, it can really teach you about the group. It can teach you about what players gravitate towards leadership roles, and if it's a little too heavy-handed, which players are more participative, and I might put the flair on them a little bit more because they'll share it around, something like that.
Yeah, that's killer. What a good way to exercise agency too, because it's really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but if it's a separate group of smaller characters, it's kind of like, do whatever you want, jump, run, get killed, who cares, have fun. It's like letting a kid run around before bed. Get it all out now.
That's really smart.
I mean?
I don't think about it that way. That's why you guys were so tame in that battle session. Like, we got it all out when we got killed by the Shadowlands as slaves.
When we blew up ninjas with Jade.
We blew up ninjas with Jade. I was listening.
One of the things that I learned fairly early on from another actor in one of the groups that I played in, he was actually a professional actor. And he told me that even in a scene where you're silent, don't just say that you're being quiet or you're not saying anything. Describe how you're silent.
Nice.
Describe what it looks like because you're not saying anything. Then it's interesting.
That's great.
It's not you just deciding that you're disengaging with the scene.
I roll my eyes. I cross my arms. I sigh heavily. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's killer. That says a lot. Body language and all that. That's really smart.
And you also don't talk for 10 minutes. Like you're just doing your thing,
Right.
You're showing your thing, and you're allowing other players to pick up the ball.
Dude, but some of the most tense moments happen in silence. You know what I mean? And that's one of the biggest tricks I picked up as a GM is I will wait 5 whole seconds before I say anything. And most of the time the players just get closer and closer because they're like, what are you going to say? It's like, so yeah.
Good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's a lot like learning to use negative space when you're making art.
Correct.
It's just as valuable as, presence of something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. On to question number 2. This is from Karen Davies. Is there a difference between player agency and character agency? Sometimes for the good of the story or to introduce conflict or consequences, can you force a certain action upon a character?
And now I'm wondering, have we been talking about character agency this whole time without realizing it? Is player agency what we something completely different? Is there a difference between player agency and character agency? Okay, yeah, I think player agency would be if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to separate them and decide what the difference is. The things that we've been talking about allowing characters to kill NPCs, allowing characters to rob people or each other, that's character agency. That's allowing the characters to make decisions. Saying things like, what do you see on the door? What do you see in this room? What sort of, you pull a book off the shelf, what's it called? That's player agency. Allowing them to not only participate in the story a little bit more, but in the world. They're creating, you're allowing them on the other side of the GM screen a little bit when you're giving them the ability to make those decisions.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%. I think player agency is the meta game of, as I said, is what I've been describing as like, hey, here's what I think as Tim, this is what I think would be fun right now if Christoph did. Character agency is them having to play within the restrictions of the world as you lay out. So in Dragon Grin, player agency might be, hey, I want to explore what it looks like to rebel. So I'm going to pick a fight with that Marrow. Character agency is what consequences in Dragon Grin happen when you pick a fight with the Marrow. And so having sort of that cause and effect in game, I think, is character agency. It also has to do with the limitations of, I want to jump to the moon. Well, you can't. That's not an agency choice. That's a limitation of your character. So your character agency is limited also by your ability. A level 1 can't do what a level 12 can do, and that's how I probably define those two.
But I rolled a 20. I want to touch the moon, man.
Right, exactly.
There's a 1 in 20 chance I'm going to touch the moon.
Yeah.
I think that it's funny because character agency is something I think every player wants to think that they have. They want to experience that. They want to know that they can make decisions for their character that you as the GM will take and run with.
Yeah.
Not every player likes player agency. Yeah. It was very shocking to me when I was told by a player, hey, can you stop asking me what I see? I want you to do that work. I want you to tell me. And it made a ton of sense. I was like, wow, okay, yeah, that's a good point. You're like, it really breaks my immersion when I jump into that meta perspective. I'm not game mastering. So
yeah,
it's really, it depends on the group in that way, I think.
And some people don't have a comfort level or even a skill set to come up with that stuff on the fly, and it makes them very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so even if they're like the best at it, they're like, well, ask him.
Yeah.
Like, no. I just want to, nope.
Yeah. Yep. Which is why it's good to experiment with player agency with smaller things, like what's their hair color?
Right.
Even the person who is the worst improver ever will know that, okay, they're a ginger. Right. Or like brown hair, blonde hair.
Exactly.
There are only a certain number of hair colors.
And then after the game, I'd be like, hey, listen, I'm sorry if I picked the wrong hair color. Then you're like, okay, that's not the person to throw it to.
Yeah. Listen, man, I'm really beating myself up over that pink hair I gave that elf. I'm sorry. It's like, yeah, you made a big mistake. They're a fan of Good Charlotte. They have Liberty spikes. I'll probably take it.
That's too good.
So it sounds maybe like a way that we could put it would be that player agency is a way to shape the world outside of your character. And character agency is ways that your character is going to shape the world around them by their actions.
Yep, that's perfect.
Absolutely perfect. You could have saved us 10 minutes of time if you would have just said that, Jeremy.
I'll just answer all the questions myself
yeah,
first,
we'll stand here.
and then
I'll play with Galactus.
Anything to add?
I'll play with this Thanos figure. Ooh, this is the cutest
little
bad guy
I know.
ever. He's so cute.
All right. So another question that Karen Davies asked is, do you change the amount of player agency between one-shots versus campaigns?
Maybe, to say it this way, if it's a one-shot, a lot of that stuff is fun to talk about, but won't matter. Just like in a short story, you get to the core meat stripped down. This is the essential stuff to tell the story. So it's like in a one-shot, I don't really take, it's not less. It's just, hey, let's all decide. We're zooming in pretty far here. You know what I mean? Like, this is the story we want to tell. We have literally one shot at this. We're not going to grow over a season. This is a short story, not a novel.
Yep.
So your agency isn't less, but I want you to really distill it into what matters for this story. Agreed.
My immediate answer was yes, I would change it, because a one shot, we have this amount of time, we have this amount of energy, we're telling a single story.
Yep.
A campaign, let your hair down a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Whenever time is a limiting factor, sometimes you have to give up a bit of your agency, I think.
Right.
On all fronts.
Same as a game master. How many game masters are like, oh man, I didn't realize this. I thought I had only one session's worth and it was 5.
Yep.
Time to give up a little of your agency.
Yep. Start in media res.
Guilty. It happens to me a lot.
We are all guilty.
I think every time.
I'm like, oh, this scene won't take that long, so we could have this other stuff. And then they get in the scene, they're like, no, this is all we want to do all night. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay.
How often have you been a player in a one shot and you've gotten that very close to hour 4 and you're like, they're going to ask to turn this into a 2-shot. I'm
a trilogy,
or a trilogy.
Or someone in the game chat, outside of the game goes, you guys want to do a campaign? You're like, oh, if I could.
Yeah. Oh, do I want to?
Would I love to?
Or
yes.
will I?
Excellent. So one of the other questions that I wanted to make sure to get in, and several of the questions kind of have to do with a similar kind of topic. So this is from Taylor Jeffrey. She says, how do you handle players who don't want agency or would rather just kind of be along for the ride? And does it change if you have one player who's the de facto decision maker for the group? Is there ever even an even split of agency amongst the players, or is somebody always the leader? Because it has to be that way.
Depends on the group. Next question.
Yeah.
Next question. This is such a
I think that's a great answer. It's you know what? It's a lot like a band. When there's a really good bass part in Fleetwood Mac's The Chain, that is the only instrument that should be playing. But if that was the whole band's shtick, it would get boring really quickly. So that's how talk about the second part. For the first part, if a player doesn't want agency, no problem. Absolutely, I'll take the reins there. No worries.
I think you rarely notice it when a player doesn't want agency.
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe there are some certain circumstances, but more often you realize when a player wants agency and they'll take it. Other players, if the sign that they don't want it, they might sink to the background a little bit.
Yeah. Which
flares.
Right.
Pull
exactly.
them in. Just
pull them in. Give them that moment. Now, if there is a de facto leader, again, it comes down to intent. Does everyone want a de facto leader? I played in one-shots where there was one. I was the DM, and there was one person dragging everyone else along in the best way. Everyone else was meandering. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever. I don't know. And one person was like, "We question the constable." I'm like, "Thank Paylor." So there can be a good de facto leader. Now, if someone's like, "Hey, he doesn't speak for me. She doesn't speak for me," then I'd be like, "Hey, you're not the de facto leader." Right.
Yep. Making that a character decision where it's like, instead of saying, I don't really like you making decisions for the group, make it so your character's like, I disagree, but we'll go along with it for now. Like that,
Exactly.
You're making your differences known without breaking the immersion, without creating an actual conflict between people.
I love that.
And so a second kind of part of that question, and again, some of these had to do with this, is say you don't have somebody who necessarily doesn't want agency, but like maybe a new player who doesn't understand agency. So how do you, are there tips or tricks that you could use to kind of coax that out of someone?
I'm trying to come up with something that I haven't mentioned yet because I'm so basic, but I would ask them what sigil they see on the door. I would ask them small questions about their family history in between games, and I would start the session with a vision or a dream sequence where they remember those things. I would almost like you're fishing. You send out a line asking them what weapon this constable has around their hip, and see, okay, what do they say? Are they gonna say, I don't know, what do you guys think? A sword. Okay, that I learned as much from that as it's a rapier with tiny rubies all along the hilt, and it's made of brass, not gold, so it looks prestigious, but you know that it's cheap, or something like that. Like,
you're like, okay, yep, yeah.
That person will make my campaign for me if I want him to.
Yeah.
Can you take these notes and flesh them out for me? I'll see you next week.
There you go. No, and I completely agree with that. You know why? Because for a lot of media, for a new player, everything is set. A video game, a movie, a television show, anything like that, a comic book. It is specifically set out a certain way, and the only choice you have is what you think about it, how it affects you, whether you like it or not. That's the choice you have. Mm-hmm. Whether you enjoy it, whether you relate to it, how you relate to it. Mm-hmm. So giving people these sort of little exercises of, no, you can make up whatever you want, and if you go too far, I'll stop you, is a really cool way. So I think that's actually a really good way to do it, which is a new player, I think as simple as explaining to them, hey, don't forget, in this world, we can kind of make up whatever we want, but we want to make sure that it kind of fits with the story we're telling. So in the same way that you see certain things happening, and again, I always lean on things that they're familiar with, shared references. So what's your favorite show? Oh, I love, whatever. And then you go, okay, cool. Well, in the same way, think of it as like that, but you get to say, well, what if this happened? And let's all do that together. Oh, I can do that? Yeah, absolutely. So let's practice. And if you go too far, don't worry. We'll workshop it. Like giving them the freedom to fail is a big part of it, I think.
Yeah. I would rather have a player describe their character as picking up a glass bottle off the bar and hitting someone over the head with it, as opposed to a player that asks me if there's a bottle on the bar.
Right.
And I tell the players that. I have no problem telling them that, like, hey, that's something you can do. So,
right.
Maybe that helps.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's where we're going to go ahead and put a bow on it, guys. So I appreciate you coming on and discussing the topic with me today. It was wonderful. I always love talking about games and gaming, and being able to have people who so succinctly put their thoughts into words is very, very fun for me, being able to have this kind of a conversation. I can't think of a better way to spend a Friday night other than maybe playing.
I always forget how fun these conversations are until I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, this has been awesome.
It's been amazing.
I feel like I've learned a lot.
There's a good friend of mine that we would play after D&D. We would sit down and talk, and sometimes it'd become 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And we're like, oh shit, like we need to go to sleep. We have, things to do tomorrow. So finding people to have those kinds of conversations is a real treat. So I appreciate it.
Ditto, man.
All right. Do you guys want to plug anything or do any kind of a sign off before we put a bow on it and call it a night?
We have a stack of books right here. Actually, we can plug all of these. You have a stack of Shadows Over Driftchapel, Adventure Kit, In Gloam, Flintlock Dark Fantasy, Lovecraftian goodness. And it's the most beautiful. I think it's I think this is the most beautiful
Yep,
book
say
I've
it.
seen.
I give you full agency.
Like, I know. It's like, well, whatever, you know. It's like looking in a mirror and saying, "God, you're so beautiful." What's the name of that Greek character who? There's a word.
Oh, Dr. Phil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh man, someone. Oh, dude.
Oh, not Persephone.
No, it's why am I so? There's a word that describes someone who is infatuated with themselves.
Narcissist.
Narcissus. Yep. Okay.
Narcissistic.
Wow. Why did I get that?
You dug that hole pretty deep.
Yeah, I did. No kidding.
It's either Narcissus or Dr. Phil. I
Same
will
person,
say,
actually.
Yeah. I will say that if there are any unanswered questions, Barker's going to be here all weekend. We might be able to get to them outside of this stream, maybe in like a side stream and plug this stream or something. I don't know. I feel bad.
Smart idea.
Because we'll be together. So maybe we'll find some more time to do that. So if you have many other questions, we want to make sure they get answered somehow. Let's
try to do that tomorrow. No, again, no promises, but let's try to like set aside some time to look through the comments and pick some questions that we haven't really touched on. And
that'd be awesome. I'll even see if we could get a James Carney to sit right here.
No, he'll sit out there.
Galactus.
Well,
anybody have any questions for Galactus? Actually, we forgot to.
No, we asked him what kind of planets he likes to eat.
Oh, what kind of planets do you like to eat?
He already told us.
I know he told us, but he wasn't live.
Oh, we weren't live?
No. All right. He doesn't have to answer, though. He's a stingy little...
Sandy biomed planets are too carby, so he likes to stick to water ones because he's on galactic keto.
Galactic keto. And Jeremy said he can't eat any gas giants before bed.
Get the indigestion. It's horrible.
Cosmic indigestion.
You don't understand until you've had cosmic indigestion up in your lungs.
You don't understand.
I don't understand. Galactus, he's from New Jersey.
They just...
He is. He is. This is so cool.
Okay. So, anyways, yeah, thank you guys very, very much. I will second the plug for Shadows Over Drift Chapel. It's a fantastic book. It is beautiful. I actually, I ran a game. It was before I got the book in my hand, but I did run a game here on the channel that is more or less, it used Shadows Over Drift Chapel, but it takes place in Harbinger. So if you're looking for an example of Shadows Over Drift Chapel run, you can find one right here on the channel. So go check it out.
I love that.
Awesome. Well, guys, like I said, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, Tim, for jumping at the last minute and being a part of this.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Gosh, this has been amazing.
And thank you, everyone in the audience, for tuning in this evening and giving us a little bit of your time and your questions. So until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.